Welcome to a special edition of the Emerging Civil War podcast. And it's my pleasure today to be bringing you a little bit of breaking news in the Civil War world. And we're going to introduce to you Terry Heder, who is the new historian for Civil War Trails. Terry, thanks for being with us.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. So, you're joining Civil War Trails as their first full-time historian. Uh,
It's
tell me a
exciting.
little, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's a great opportunity. I've been involved with Civil War history for a couple of decades now. For many years, I was with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, the National Historic District, writing, editing, researching, doing history there. But the love of all the work that I've done has always been in terms of the interpretation, the writing, the editing, the bringing of things to the public. And so, having a chance with Civil War Trails to have that be the forefront of the work I'm doing is a dream job. It's a dream opportunity for me to be able to pursue that and to help with a program that I've been involved with. If you know, I was on the board for many years actually with the Trails many years ago, and so very familiar with it, and never imagined I had the opportunity to have such as this.
Now, coming to the trails from the Shenandoah Valley, where there are some pretty unique challenges in the valley because
Mhm.
the many battlefields spread out over vast distances and people have to travel and connect the dots. So, in some ways, it's kind of like a training ground for what you're doing on a more national stage.
Very much so. One of the unique challenges, of course, with trails is that being able to be on the ground is not always a possibility. There things may be 8 hours away, and you can't just hop in the car and go there as you can when you're working on something in the valley. So you're trying to look through working with the local partners there who are incredibly generous. Photography, Google satellite images, maps, everything else you can to understand the lay of the ground that can matter a whole lot, as you know, in terms of interpreting what happened there. And so that's a little different than being able to get in the car and go out and walk the ground, with a 2 hour round trip anywhere that you'd like to. But it's also opened up a lot of new areas that I am for the first time. It's like fresh history, places that I had not been much involved with before, and smaller stories and smaller experiences, and that are part of the mosaic of telling that entire history of the Civil War. But you often don't get paid attention to with the larger, higher profile stories, personalities. There's a chance both for me to explore those, but also to help bring those to greater public awareness and to help encourage folks to travel and visit those sites.
Drew Gruber, the executive director of Civil War Trails, very good friend of Emerging Civil War. And I love the line where he talks about Civil War Trails being the world's largest outdoor museum with 1,500 sites across 6 states. So vast canvas, as you mentioned. So some new stories for you. But you really, I think, made an important point about how, despite the vastness of that canvas, it really comes down to local partners.
Very much.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, local partners are great for two reasons. One is resources, the finding history and information you can't find anywhere else. So there's often small museums that may have in their collections documents or research both from the wartime period, but also people in more recent years they put together that you can't find online or in published sources, but they can get that to you and help. They're The key though for me with local is that you're trying to support their own efforts on the ground, and that what trails can bring is a national presence and a national weight and a national branding to bring people to those smaller out of the way sites that might not otherwise get that attention. Trails is you see the bugle sign on the highways, you know that to turn to get to that story here, and it's a way to again, a lot of history is trying to bring those untold stories to life. I often say that we owe a debt to the people who lived through those days to keep their stories alive. This is our chance to do that at these smaller ones that, without our help, would get forgotten historically, but also for the local people today, the ones who have that small battlefield site or a small historic home or in a museum that's nearby that they may have trouble getting a lot of traffic. By having something that's part of the Civil War Trails brand, you can increase that traffic and awareness in a way that will benefit them in the long term, and of course benefit the traveler, benefit the visitor, the history buff there, to allow them to discover these new and different sites on their way.
That's one thing I love about following trails is, as you connect the dots, like, oh, wait, here's a cool little bed and breakfast, and here's
Mhm.
a cool little brewery or a winery, it's a great restaurant. So great ways to enhance that visit as you're out exploring history.
Well, you want to see the local businesses benefit, frankly, from that for a couple of reasons. One, that's a great thing to do, but also then they get behind history. If you can show people at those restaurants and at those local stores that they benefit by having travelers come to their community and spending money at their sites, they're going to get more behind that too about, oh, this is a cool thing to promote this story and this history here. So it becomes not just a esoteric for them. Why would anybody care? But it's something they can see, but why it matters to the local communities. But also, you hope you get a sense of pride for them in keeping that story alive.
Yeah, there's that, as soon as they start to see the benefits and realize how important it is, they become much more invested in preserving that history and sharing that history and helping
Exactly.
broaden that story in the community.
It's part
So,
of their becomes part of their tourism economic development appeal in the communities. That's why so much is tying in with local visitor bureaus to try and get people to those sites that coordinate both the storytelling and placement, but also how you promote and market that to get people there. It's not enough to have something there. You've got to find a way to get that message out to people. And from both the trails reach and the local folks and the state tourism bureaus, you can really have a lot of weight and a lot of impact and catch a lot of eyeballs and hope a lot of foot and vehicle traffic coming to those sites.
yeah. So Terry, tell us your Civil War origin story. How did you get started in this in the first place?
I was as a small kid, I was lucky enough to get interested in history, and it was in the probably the late '60s, early '70s. I'm quite old compared to a lot of folks there. That and it was in the I think the echoes of the centennial commemoration. It was after it, but they were still resonated in the popular culture, and so I saw parts of that there. Initially, it was just Civil War either. It was the Daniel Boone TV show that was on at the time. There are other parts. There was the I well remember the Walter Cronkite "You Are There" TV program from the reboot of his older program that was in the '70s. That there are all these little things that are around. Their history is much more prevalent in those days for a youngster. I do remember catching the American Heritage, books of the Civil War or something really got my eye there. The bird's eye three-dimensional views of battlefields that for a kid, brought it to life in a way that was beyond just the images. And then I was lucky enough, as I mentioned to people all the time, to have once I got that interest and wanted to read more about it, find out more about it, to have both teachers who encouraged that. They would bring books from home for me to read about things, but also parents. We took a huge cross country trip leading up to between the second and third grade. And my parents made a point to make a huge detour to go to both Little Bighorn there, not Civil War, but Civil War related, but also Gettysburg, the first battlefields I had visited. And it strikes a spark when you are able to go and visit those. And so from that time on, both the history, but also the desire to go to these places where it happened there and to see the ground and to see the places, whether it's Civil War, or it's Kitty Hawk in North Carolina, or Jamestown in Virginia, Fort Moultrie in Charleston, South Carolina, a place that I remember very well as a kid being able to travel to. So I was lucky enough to have the interest, but also to have the adults that help foster that. And I always want to make sure to pay tribute to those because that's something not every kid has.
I really love how you talk about that power of place and you go there and you connect and it really helps, cement that passion, which is really kind of what the trail system's all about, go
Exactly.
out and be on the ground and put your feet there in the footsteps of history and connect that way.
There's nothing quite like that. I love books. I'm surrounded by books all my life. I love descriptions, photographs, maps, all that. And those are all wonderful and indispensable. But there is nothing like being on the ground, being at the place. All those help inform what's there, but standing on one, there's a mystical feeling to that, to being where these events happen. But also, frankly, things come to life that you can't. A page can tell you about this slope of ground, or how this river cuts across here, or the roadway here, or a height there, but it's something else to go see it or to climb that slope and to go up and see. I'm doing this with dressed casually today. What was it like with a soldier carrying all that weight trying to go up the slope and somebody shooting at you as you were doing it on the way? So there's the aha moments that come to folks that make it more immediate. A big part of history to me is trying to get people to think about it not as a in remove, but as an immediate what happened to the people, individuals there, what it would have been me, what it would have been like to have been me walking across that, and to make it where, um, um, again, it's not the description of brigades or the red and blue bars on a map, but the individual soldiers or civilians in other stories who were going through those times.
Do you have a particular battlefield that remains your favorite today?
Because being in the valley so much, I think Cross Keys is the
Oh.
one that occurs to me. It is such a beautiful battlefield, so well preserved, thanks to the people who lived there over the years, but also the work that the Battlefields Foundation has done over the years, the Civil War Trust and others to preserve the ground there, so that even as development moves out, as it is from Harrisonburg in the valley, dramatically in that direction, that'll be preserved forever. And it is gorgeous. Are able to see both the battlefield and the lay of the ground there, but also Massanutten Mountain to one direction, Blue Ridge Mountains to the other in a way that's just, it's a, you don't have to care about history to appreciate the preservation, be able to walk on that ground, that the rural cultural farming look of the valley, be combined that what happened there and just brings to life in a way that's unbeaten. So I tend to really enjoy the more unspoiled battlefields like that. You don't give up on the ones that are spoiled, for lack of a better word. You still tell that story and bring it to life, but they're clearly something that's again more moving to be at a place like that, or a place like Antietam, obviously that we all know that feels so much like it would have been at the time of the war.
Funny you mentioned that about not giving up on the ones that have gotten developed, and I think about how valuable Civil War Trails was when I went to Front Royal, and they've got a great
Mhm.
trail system through Front Royal that kind of helps you understand in the midst of all the traffic and the intersections and the strip malls, like, well, here's what actually happened, back in 1862, and I found that invaluable.
I think it's a critical duty of the organization like Trails, people keeping history alive today, is to not give up, because that, in a way, a community develops. It's going to develop where battles were in many cases, like Front Royal is a most prominent case in the area. The others, Waynesboro, another way. There are parts of the First Battle Winchester in the Valley, other battlefields throughout the country that yeah, you can't see what you would have seen at the time, but there are still dramatic stories to tell, moving personal stories to tell, and again the history to keep alive to folks today. And you can, done right, still bring them along and help them understand what happened there. They're in different ways through it's not as easy as being able to say, look at that, look at Little Round Top there, but there are ways to do that. And it's a service. It's, again, to me, it fits in what the responsibility we have to keep that history alive, whatever the obstacles may be today. And yeah, trails and the interpretive markers and the way the trails brings these stories together, the way it helps foster people to visit these, to the interactive map on the website, again, working through the brochures that people can get and follow along as they're going through the state of Tennessee or going through Maryland, there makes it so much more accessible to the visitor, because part of that is, I mean, we all can lament, as people do, that there isn't as much interest in history today as there was years ago. To be honest, I don't remember kids when I was growing up all being interested in history to begin with, but in general, that's true. But the key to me is that you don't wring your hands and say, "Oh, what a travesty!" It's what can you do about it. And a program like Trails, interpretive markers, and the way it ties them together is a great way of fighting it back against that and keeping those stories alive in a way, just whatever the obstacles may be.
Yeah. It's and what one of the things that's really cool about it is aside from the bugle and the signs, you've got the wayside markers. They're very visible, and so people just come to recognize them in the way that they might like a marker or a monument or a memorial, where it's like there's something. Let's check it out. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's chat about it. And so they're it invites people to engage.
And it's a brand, too. It's not like growing up when I saw the National Park Service logo. As a kid, I knew that's a place I wanted to go. Trails represents the same branding today. As you follow along, you read signs, you're looking for that, and you'll be coming down sometimes a small country road. All of a sudden, there's a bugle sign leading you to go to a trail site. You get excited as a history buff that there is a story there you did not know about, and so there's a, it's also a responsibility if you're working, as in my new position with Trails, the story editor, to make sure both that the stories are compelling. They are something that when a visitor gets there, they're it's an aha moment for them. It isn't just there. It's something that brings it to life, but also makes it a interesting narrative. That they're really glad they discovered it and want to learn more, and are even more eager the next time they see a bugle sign down the road.
Yeah. And of course the challenge of getting that all into 150 words or whatever too. I mean, tell a really
That's
good story concisely.
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of stories that would work well in 3,000 words, but you know, that's not possible. And that's the toughest part. You are going to have to, as writers, they cut out your little darlings. There are great anecdotes, great quotes, great uh, um, uh, incidents that can't make it into a final song because there's just not the words to do it there. What you hope is both to pick out the ones and choose the ones that are most relevant, most compelling, but also encourage folks to find out more. That they will want to learn more either at other signs that are apart along that trail, or by going to read more about in books or online about those stories. Encourage that follow up. You cannot do all of it on the ground. If you tried to, you'd bore people to death. They're not. It looked like, as we say, a homework assignment, and that's what you don't want. You want to look at something that's, again, fun, interesting, engaging to read, highly visual. Bill Cullen, who works at Design Civil War Trails, does an amazing job of designing the signs to make them visually compelling. Keeping the text, yes, to a minimum there, so it doesn't look like a chore. But then once I get into it, making them, again, not only be interested in that, but also wanting to learn more through other sources.
So tell me, as someone who has looked at a lot of signs and now someone who's going to have to be writing a lot of signs, when you walk up to one of those panels, what do you see?
Um, Imagery matters a lot when you're first coming up to it. Like anything else, there it's kind of like books. A book cover matters. There, when you put it out there, it's something that gets people to pay attention to the start. So it's finding, and of course, civil imagery can be either very plentiful with some battlefields and sites, and very hard to find with others. So you often have to be creative. So that's the first thing grabs you. But then with the sign, I think it's in the writing. You've got to capture and grab their attention with the opening. You've got to set them in the place and what the story was happening there right away. You can then backtrack, tell a little bit more about setting the scene, about what brought them there. But if you get into a large overall, here's this campaign there for the beginning, you're going to lose a large part of the audience. So as I go up to read a sign, I'm looking at that too. I'm looking both and I've seen a lot of amazing signs that folks have written that really do that. And I've seen others that don't work as well there. And so you try to learn as a writer there what works for you is there, and to get third party opinion. You ask your wife, ask friends, what impact it's have on them, so you're able to school that. For an individual sign, though, it has to be enough to tell, again, a place-based story there, compelling, but also give it the answer the so what question. Why should I care? I mean, again, as historians are all familiar with that you have to give a reason for why people don't say, and turn away and never come and be involved with it again. So what happened, why it mattered, and setting context are really critical for any sign such as that. And yes, as you said before, then distilling down the vast amount of information you will often find into making that is a challenge, because you always do worry that you're going to cut out something that's really critical to somebody, and they'll later say, why wouldn't you mention this or that there? And they'll say, well, in the 3 drafts ago it was there, but they just as you cut down, just can't make it.
Yeah, I used to run into that problem early in my career when I worked in radio, and it's like you have 3 minutes, and like it just has to fit in 3 minutes. And so, what choices are you going to make about what fits in those 3 minutes? And you just can't fit it all. So,
Yeah, and I'm somewhat famous, thinking among people, but ending up with 2,000 words in initial drafts and having to cramp down. But I prefer to have too much and too much detail and pick and choose, as hard as it is, than to start out with not enough. But it's amazing, even with topics and sites you think there may not be a lot of information, how often doing research finds that there is a lot more than you thought there was. Again, often through local sources or through. We are blessed today to have the internet, that you can find a lot of things you could not before, either through public sources, but also down the rabbit holes, finding a rare PDF here that of somebody's diary or documents that there. The one thing you'll often find is, as you know, is that you'll do a lot of that research. You may take a couple hours to find something. In the end, there's nothing there.
right.
There's nothing out to it, but you've got to do it. You've got to do that scut work to set the basis for it. So it's a lot of fun to do that, but it also can't. You got to be ready for it to lead you down to an avenue that has no reward.
Yeah, yeah. And then of course you can do all that stuff and it still doesn't beat like standing on the ground. Like you still have to make that as your final puzzle piece to kind of
Exactly.
make that.
There, what, especially if there are things specific you can see and refer to on that sign, to your right, to your left, there. I learned over the years I have a bad habit of saying north of here, which means nothing to someone who's standing there. They're not thinking about compass direction. So you relate to that. If you can find buildings or other structures or a stream bed or whatever to make that, again, more immediate and easier to understand. You don't want to challenge people to understand what you're trying to explain. You want to be as clear as you can. be interesting, be colorful, write it well, but also clarity is critical if you're talking about especially the average visitor.
Right, right. So, what is it that attracted you to make the jump to Civil War trails at this point?
I had been working with the foundation for, I guess, 16 years. They're an incredible place and doing incredible work to this day in terms of preserving and interpreting the war in the Valley. But as the organization expanded and grew into different parts of its mission, my job turned away from a lot of what I really love to do in terms of writing and editing. There were less time for that. It still was there, but a lot of other work that wasn't as much fun for someone who's in this for the fun part of history. And so, as getting older, I wanted to try something different. So I went out on freelance and have done that for the past year, working actually with the foundation, some more wood trails and others, and thinking that would be my course going down for the foreseeable future. Not thinking that this opportunity would come up with trails. There, it was a godsend. That something again is exactly what I love and want to do with an organization I've been involved with for I think 17 years now or close to that there and you can't beat that. So it's the work I love to do, topics I love to pursue, being able to go and visit sites that are historic sites that are part of that, getting paid to do it. I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, we all know that people look and think about historians and say, "I wish I'd love to have that job. I wish I'd have the job." Often they don't know what goes into that work, and so they there and even here there's a lot more work. But I do have that job that they all want.
Mm. And it's kind of a big step for Civil War trails. They've had a part-time historian, but to go to a full-time historian, kind of a testament to the success and growth of the program. Tell me a little bit about that.
It is, and it's one thing kind of reflects we've seen elsewhere too. Is that I know a lot of folks. The Civil War Sesquicentennial was on many things. It was, among other things, the big promotional event for anyone involved with this business of our time because it brought eyeballs and attention to here to our story and to the works that we're involved with there. But for a lot of folks, they found that after the 2014, 2015, the tension fell away. But for others, it has not. It has only grown and expanded. And one of those is trails that continue to do this work. You've just seen more and more sites come on board, more and more visitors coming, more and more attention to it. And so the potential, the opportunities became bigger and the workload became bigger. And so the possibility of having somebody on full time to both do that work, but also to respond quicker when you have a client who has an issue or wants something changed or revised or a new sign comes online, so able to be much more of a full service organization all the time to these folks, and to help in terms of you get a lot of signs that are submitted by local folks, local historians in there. And it's great and invaluable, but you've got to do a lot of fact checking on that, a lot of research. You often have to do rewriting. You honor what they've written, but you have to redo it in the style that's appropriate for the signs. But also, it can't just take information they've done on faith. That's a tricky road to go down. So there's a lot of that there. And so having a full-time historian makes that a lot easier. That I can spend that time and doing that rabbit hole research to check on both what they have, but also see what else I might be able to find that could add to that sign there. So it's a great asset for the program there. I think a great service to the folks who use the program, both the current clients, but also ones looking at the future. They'll be able to again have even more helpful program, always been helpful, but even more responsive because of having somebody full-time dedicated to this work.
So, as you look ahead to settling into this role, certainly there's the learning curve, but say 2, 3, 5 years down the road, any hopes, goals, plans?
I don't think so. I think because, again, for someone who has been involved with this as I have, and from the childhood dream of being involved with history of Civil War, this is kind of the ultimate position to be in. I want to see the program continue to grow, and we'll find new and different ways to do that to bring more visitors and to these sites and more sites online. Professionally, myself, this is really, again, really much a dream job and a dream opportunity. And give me a chance to be out in the field and meeting and talk with other historians and other events and programs too, which I'm looking forward to, which I haven't had as much opportunity since the sesquicentennial because of other types of work. And to meet people on the ground and be able to engage with them and hear their stories and how I can help tell their stories better at their individual sites when it's within travel distance. You can probably tell from my voice, the excitement is, you couldn't be more excited or thrilled about the opportunity. And Yeah, I can't imagine I wouldn't want to still be doing this and to be doing it to do it at this pace in that future, in that 5, 10 years in the future. I'm someone who doesn't have any plans to retire because I'm able to do what I love to do. There it is work, there, but it's work that you love. It's fulfilling work. It's one rewarding. It's work that you believe is making a difference. Both, and again, recording that history, but helping these communities and these stories on the ground.
So before we wrap up, Terry, anything I haven't asked you that I should have? Any final thoughts you want to share with folks?
No, I can't think of anything. You did a great job of covering what I would have thought of. Everything from the what brought me to this to going today. I would say that encourage folks to who haven't been to take advantage of the trails program in their area, both in terms of visiting those sites, but also think about what stories haven't been told that might be able to be told by having an interpretive marker here that kind of brings that history to life, but also ties it in again to this vast network that to bring visitors there. There's a lot of out of the way places, things that happened that were, little remembered today that deserve more recognition. So I hope folks will continue to look for those opportunities to be able to bring that history to life because you've got, I knew when I began work in the Valley there to discover there was already a program doing these markers like a godsend. We didn't have to create something like that. It was already here. The same thing today. You've got this great full service organization that's able to do from soup to nuts in terms of development of signs and the content, the infrastructure, and everything else, and then to promote them in a way that's unmatched. It's a great asset for history across our country, but also a great opportunity for folks who are, again, want to bring their local stories to life there. So that's, I'm looking forward to doing that, to discovering more news stories from folks as we go along, and again, to being someone who helps them in their own efforts to preserve the history of their local communities.
Very good. And I'll put in a quick little pitch that if you want to start planning your trips now, Civil War Trails has all sorts of great stuff on their website. You can download their free brochures at civilwartrails.org.
Thank you.
Terry, good luck. I'm
Thank
super
you very much.
excited that we'll be able to work together. And,
Me too.
congratulations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to, again, to among other things, working with more folks like yourself in the field and others that I have not been able to see for a few years. And so it's been great to have boots on the ground as I go around the country.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
I'm Chris
thank you.
Mackowski for the Emerging Civil War podcast. We'll see you online on the Civil War trails and on the battlefields.
Thank you.